Picture this. 9 knights arrive in Jerusalem in 1119, claiming their mission is to protect Christian pilgrims on dangerous roads. But here's the strange part. For nearly a decade, they don't protect a single pilgrim. Instead, they dig. Day after day, night after night, beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple, they excavate in complete secrecy. And when they finally emerge, they're no longer poor knights. They've become the wealthiest, most powerful organization in medieval Europe. What did they find down there? And why did it make the Vatican so terrified that they would eventually destroy the entire order? You're about to discover a secret that has been buried for over 700 years. A truth so dangerous that it threatened the very foundations of Christianity itself. Because what the Knights Templar uncovered beneath Jerusalem wasn't gold or silver. It was something far more valuable and infinitely more terrifying. Knowledge that could rewrite history, challenge divine authority, and expose the greatest cover-up in human civilization. This isn't just another conspiracy theory. This is a story built on historical facts, documented evidence, and patterns of behavior that reveal a systematic campaign of suppression. By the time we're done, you'll understand why 9 knights became the most feared men in Europe, why the Pope himself ordered their destruction, and why their discovery still sends tremors through the halls of the Vatican today. But to understand what they found, we need to go back to the beginning, back to that dusty hill in Jerusalem where it all started. The year was 1119. The Crusades had been raging for 2 decades. Jerusalem had been captured, but the Holy Land remained a violent, chaotic place. Pilgrims traveling to sacred sites faced constant threat from bandits, hostile locals, and warring factions. It was into this environment that 9 French knights presented themselves to King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a proposition. Their leader was Hugh de Payens, a minor nobleman from Champagne. Alongside him stood Godfrey de Saint-Omer, Payen de Montdidier, and 6 other knights whose names history has barely preserved. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Their stated mission was simple: protect the pilgrims traveling between the port of Jaffa and Jerusalem. King Baldwin agreed to their proposal and granted them quarters in his palace, which had been built on the Temple Mount, directly above the ruins of Solomon's temple. This decision would change the course of history, but here's where the official story starts to crumble. These 9 knights, who claimed to be protectors of pilgrims, were never seen protecting pilgrims. No historical record exists of them escorting travelers or engaging bandits. No grateful pilgrims wrote letters home praising their saviors. No chroniclers documented their heroic deeds on the roads. Instead, witnesses reported something far more mysterious. The knights were excavating. Using the access granted by their royal quarters, they had begun a systematic dig beneath the Temple Mount. They worked in shifts around the clock, moving earth and stone with an urgency that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't random treasure hunting. Archaeological evidence discovered in modern times confirms that the Templars had created an extensive network of tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. These weren't crude cave-ins or hasty digs. They were carefully engineered passages, some extending hundreds of feet, all leading to specific locations beneath the ancient temple foundation. The question that haunts historians is simple. How did 9 relatively unknown knights from France know where to dig? What guided their excavation to such precise locations? And perhaps most importantly, what were they looking for? The answer lies in understanding what Solomon's temple actually was. This wasn't just a place of worship. According to biblical and historical accounts, it was a repository, a vault containing the most sacred artifacts of the Jewish faith. The Ark of the Covenant, the original stone tablets bearing the 10 Commandments, sacred scrolls, and treasures beyond imagination. But the Templars weren't interested in gold or precious stones. Evidence suggests they were searching for something far more specific. Documents, scrolls, written records that had been hidden away for over 1,000 years. Here's what we know happened next. After 9 years of excavation, the Knights emerged from their tunnels, but they were no longer the same poor soldiers who had arrived in Jerusalem. They had been transformed. Within months, they began displaying wealth that defied explanation. They commissioned the finest armor, purchased the best horses, and started recruiting knights from the most noble families in Europe. More significantly, they began demonstrating knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. They understood banking systems that wouldn't be invented for centuries. They possessed architectural techniques that allowed them to build cathedrals using geometric principles unknown to their contemporaries. They showed familiarity with languages, customs, and religious practices that had been lost to time. The transformation was so dramatic that it caught the attention of Bernard of Clairvaux, the most influential religious figure of his era. Bernard became the Templars' greatest advocate, writing passionate letters to nobles across Europe, urging them to join this new order. His endorsement was like receiving approval from the Pope himself. In 1129, the Templars appeared before the Council of Troyes, where they were officially recognized by the Church. They were granted unprecedented privileges. They answered to no earthly authority except the Pope. They were exempt from all taxes. They could build their own churches, bury their own dead, and collect their own tithes. These weren't normal privileges for a military order. These were the rights of an independent state. The Church was essentially acknowledging that the Templars possessed something so valuable that they deserved autonomy unprecedented in medieval Europe. But what exactly had they discovered beneath the Temple Mount? The clues lie in their subsequent behavior and the specific way they were eventually destroyed. The Templars began demonstrating an unusual relationship with traditional Christian doctrine. Their initiation ceremonies, conducted in complete secrecy, reportedly included rituals that differed significantly from standard Catholic practices. They venerated symbols that appeared nowhere else in Christian tradition. They possessed documents they claimed were older than the Gospels. Most telling of all, they began operating with a confidence that bordered on arrogance when dealing with church authorities. These were men who acted like they possessed leverage over the Vatican itself. They negotiated as equals with popes. They refused certain requests from church hierarchy. They behaved like an organization that held secrets capable of challenging the fundamental authority of Christianity. This is where our story takes a darker turn. Because whatever the Templars had found beneath Solomon's temple, it was something the Vatican decided could never be allowed to exist. Never be allowed to exist. The evidence of what terrified the Vatican so deeply lies scattered across centuries like pieces of a shattered mirror. Each fragment reflects the same disturbing truth. The Templars had discovered something that fundamentally challenged the Church's version of Christian history. Consider this. In 1307, on Friday the 13th of October, King Philip IV of France launched the most coordinated arrest operation in medieval history. Simultaneously, across the entire kingdom, every Templar knight, sergeant, and administrator was seized. The operation required months of planning, precise timing, and absolute secrecy. This wasn't the impulsive act of a greedy king. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to capture not just men, but knowledge. The charges brought against the Templars were unlike anything seen before in medieval jurisprudence. They weren't accused of treason or theft or military failure. Instead, they faced allegations that struck at the very heart of Christian belief. Heresy, blasphemy, denial of Christ, worship of false idols, secret ceremonies that mocked the crucifixion. But here's what makes these charges so revealing. Under torture, many Templars confessed to possessing secret knowledge about the true nature of Christ. They spoke of documents that contradicted the official gospel accounts. They reference ceremonies based on traditions that predated Christianity itself. They described artifacts that proved the church had been built on deliberate deceptions. The interrogation records, preserved in the Vatican secret archives, paint a picture of an organization that had discovered something so explosive it couldn't be allowed to survive. One Templar, under extreme duress, claimed they possessed the actual burial shroud of Christ, proving details about his death that contradicted official church teaching. Another spoke of genealogical records tracing bloodlines that the church had declared impossible. Most damning of all were the repeated references to what they called the true gospel. Multiple Templars, tortured in different locations by different inquisitors, independently described documents that told a different story about Christ's life, death, and resurrection. Documents they claimed were older and more authentic than the canonical Gospels. The Vatican's response was swift and absolute. Pope Clement V, under pressure from King Philip, officially dissolved the Templar Order in 1312. But dissolution wasn't enough. The Church demanded the destruction of everything the Templars had accumulated. Their libraries were burned, their archives were seized and disappeared into Vatican vaults. Their properties were redistributed to other religious orders who were specifically instructed to destroy any documents or artifacts they discovered. This systematic obliteration went far beyond what was necessary to eliminate a heretical organization. This was the erasure of evidence. The Church was trying to ensure that whatever the Templars had found would never surface again. But some secrets are too large to bury completely. Traces of the Templar discovery continued to emerge throughout history, each time met with the same pattern of suppression and silence. In the 14th century, a mysterious document known as the Chinon parchment was discovered in the Vatican archives. It revealed that Pope Clement had secretly absolved the Templars of heresy before their public trial. Why absolve them privately while condemning them publicly? The answer suggests the Church knew the Templars were telling the truth about their discoveries. During the Renaissance, artists and scholars began incorporating symbols and themes into their work that seemed to echo Templar knowledge. Leonardo da Vinci's paintings contained hidden imagery that challenged traditional depictions of biblical events. The cathedral builders of Chartres embedded geometric principles into their architecture that matched patterns found in Templar structures across Europe. In the 19th century, archaeological excavations beneath the Temple Mount uncovered evidence of the Templars' extensive tunneling operation. Hidden chambers were discovered containing fragments of scrolls, pieces of ancient pottery, and most significantly, carved symbols that appeared nowhere else in Christian tradition. Each time these discoveries surfaced, the same pattern repeated. Initial excitement from researchers, followed by restricted access, then official denials, and the disappearance of evidence into private collections or church archives. The Vatican's behavior throughout these centuries reveals an organization desperately trying to contain a truth that threatens its fundamental authority. Because if the Templars actually found what the evidence suggests they found, then everything the Church has taught about Christian history, about divine authority, about the nature of Christ himself, would be exposed as carefully constructed mythology. Think about what this means. 9 knights went into the ground beneath Solomon's temple as poor soldiers seeking adventure and glory. They emerged as the guardians of knowledge so dangerous that the most powerful institution in medieval Europe eventually decided they had to be completely destroyed to protect that secret. The question that remains is simple, yet terrifying. What did they find down there? What truth was so explosive that it required the systematic elimination of an entire organization to keep it hidden? And perhaps most disturbing of all, does that knowledge still exist somewhere in the deepest vaults of the Vatican, waiting like a timed bomb beneath the foundations of modern Christianity? The clues are there, scattered across 7 centuries of history, hidden in suppressed documents, coded into religious art, whispered in the confessions of tortured knights. They point toward a discovery that didn't just threaten the wealth or political power of the Church. They point towards something that threatened the very story upon which Western civilization was built. And if you're beginning to suspect that this story isn't over, that the truth the Templars discovered is still out there waiting to be uncovered, then you're starting to understand why their legacy continues to haunt the Vatican, even today. The story of the Knights Templar isn't just medieval history. It's a mirror reflecting something much more unsettling about the nature of truth itself. 9 men went into the ground beneath Jerusalem seeking one thing, and emerged with something so dangerous it would eventually cost them everything. Their transformation from obscure knights into the most powerful organization in Europe wasn't built on military conquest or political maneuvering. It was built on knowledge that made the Vatican so terrified they were willing to orchestrate one of history's most systematic destructions to keep it buried. Knowledge that continues to leave traces in suppressed documents, hidden symbols, and the desperate patterns of institutional silence that persist to this day. We may never know exactly what scrolls the Templars pulled from those ancient chambers. We may never see the documents that made hardened warriors speak of different gospels under torture. But we don't need absolute proof to recognize the shape of truth hiding in the shadows. Sometimes the cover-up reveals more than the crime itself. The next time you walk past a cathedral, look closer at the symbols carved into stone. The next time you hear about restricted archives or classified historical documents, ask yourself what might be hiding there. Because if 7 centuries of suppression have taught us anything, it's that some secrets are too dangerous to die. The Templars found something beneath Jerusalem that changed everything. The question isn't whether that discovery was real. The question is whether we're brave enough to keep looking for it,